base wage comparison.
Right.
Last night we went back through and contacted some other locals and went through their contracts to do a base-to-base comparison. We've got a spreadsheet that reflects that. I'm sure that you guys probably already have the information because Lynette pulled that from their contracts, but that reflected a 13.4% underneath on the low end and a 29.2 on the high end, which those numbers are remarkably similar to what the numbers we were dealing with the prior spreadsheets are. If you give Scott's getting that out right now.
I wouldn't mind putting it up on the big screen too. I'm sure it's recorded.
Whatever you want. It's,
Yeah, I think we'd like to have it up there.
sure.
Ken's got it.
I think your cable, just need to plug it into your.
Yep. Just need the screen.
Should be on the cable.
There should be 6.
So we updated this with everybody's FY19 numbers, except for Greeley, Colorado, which we were unable to get a hold of. So this should be an apples-to-apples comparison outside of that. And I think it's safe to assume that Greeley's didn't go down, that it probably at a minimum went up. And so we still feel that in the ballpark of a 14% reflects how far behind we are on the low side. So we understand that the city doesn't have the ability to come up with the 14% at the present number. I'll give you a second to go through that, I guess.
So these numbers have been updated from what the base numbers were on the first exhibit that we talked about yesterday.
No, those weren't base numbers. Those were base plus longevity.
Right, but it had base numbers in it.
Well,
Yes.
in the sheets.
Right.
Somewhere in Lynette's data, there were base numbers, yes.
Right, and so what I'm saying is that wouldn't have included FY19 base numbers. It would have probably been FY18 base numbers.
Anything with FY19 in the notes has FY19.
Right, I'm just trying to make sure so there's a comparison.
And just so you know too, we met with, as the compensation committee, we met and we went over most of it with FY18 numbers because that was the year we were in. But after the conclusion of the meeting as a compensation committee, some FY19 contracts came in. And so that spreadsheet that we started with, that Lynette provided, had some FY19 numbers in it that she had added after we concluded meeting as a compensation committee.
Okay, I'm just trying to make sure so that if there's a difference in numbers, then there's not a crossover comparison, and I don't want to be comparing something that shouldn't be compared. I'm just trying to track with what you're doing and the source of your data. That's all I'm trying to do.
Okay.
And those percentages of the in the match row would be the increase required for our wage to match the average. And it is the same calculation that's on the other sheets.
Okay. So, based upon this, do you have an offer?
Yeah, well, so, I mean, like I said, we don't expect you guys to, we don't feel it's realistic to go after the 14%, even though we feel like that's how far behind we are at a minimum. And what we elected to do is we went with roughly half of what that was. We went with, we kept in the additional 0.5% that you guys had in there for firefighters' base wage, because I felt like that was you guys recognizing that our firefighters are a little further behind than everyone else. And did, oh,
We just set them for Andrea.
okay.
Thank you.
So we just went with half of what we feel like we're behind on the low end, which is 7% across the board, except for the 3 firefighter positions, which would be 7.5%.
What's the, have you calculated what the, by increasing the base, what the total increase would be?
You
When
mean,
we talked yesterday, we were talking about the base increases other aspects of your contract, such as longevity. And so by increasing the base,
Yeah.
what the total cost would be?
you know, we can give you a total cost, but and I think that, or we can try to get that number to you, but your math was a little bit fuzzy to me, I guess, because if we increase, as a percentage of our entire salary, increasing by 1% doesn't increase our entire salary by 1.2. It might do it 1.2 in relation to our base, but it doesn't do it as more than 1%. In fact, it comes in at less than 1% because there's items that are not increased based on base.
Can you explain that to me?
Well, I guess you'd have to explain yours to me, because if we increase our base by 1%, and then that corresponds to increasing our longevity by 1%, or our holiday. In fact, our longevity is not even calculated off of our base. It's calculated off of an index. But if that increases our holiday by 1%, then you've got two parts of a total number that have increased by 1%. And so the overall number did not increase by 1%, it increased by less than 1%. Yeah.
Any questions?
I don't right now.
You want to caucus and talk?
Yes, please.
We'll caucus.
Okay.
Even Lynette's back.
Okay, I'll just shut it.
We up and running yet?
Yep, we're good.
Is it recording?
Yep.
Doesn't show it.
Little delay.
Are these mine?
Yep.
There we go. Apologize for the delay. We were trying to verify some cost numbers and stuff with respect to both your offer and with respect to a counter offer that we also had an opportunity to develop over the break. And we had a little computer problem that was skewing the numbers, and we're sitting here scratching our heads saying, those aren't right. So we had to take extra time and I think we've corrected that problem and come down to more realistic numbers,
Yes.
which those do make sense to me. We've had a chance to look at your base wage comparison and as compared to the one that Lynette has put together last night, and there are some differences. And what I'll do is let Lynette explain what she did and what we're handing out. So if you want to put up on the screen, what she did and what she got her data and what the amounts are.
Yep.
Put it right here so it's so we don't look. I'll set it right here. I've done that.
Speaking of technical difficulties, it won't project.
Is that plugged in all the way?
This is no source fed. It's coming down.
Okay. Okay, while we wait for that to restart, your first page here, the 2912 only, these are just base numbers pulled out of the contracts. Base, no longevity, minimum and maximum if they have them. This is FY 19 are the most current numbers that we have. So and all of these are based on actual contracts we have. If we talk to HR or something and they sent us their new pay structure, these numbers are based on their pay structure because it's an official document of the city that shows everybody and where they're at. So for Greeley, their HR department sent me what their pay plan is for the whole city. So that's what the Greeley numbers are based on, is their updated plans. I have to have something in writing to show what they're paying in order for them to have been put into this analysis. So this first page, for the second page, is just base wage with the averages. And because Greeley is an outlier, there's a separate average with and without them. And then this last page is the formulas on how everything was determined. You will notice for Twin Falls and Greeley, they are 2920s. The formula is 2912. That's irrelevant for the base numbers. That's just for the annuals, which doesn't really have a bearing on where we plan to go from here. Let's see if this will work.
So
Back this up projector, it's got a lot to me. Because then I would bring up it would bring up something.
Is that one moving?
that's not reading a source.
No, got a weird issue. Who's flashing?
Am I missing?
Oh, yeah, I don't have that one.
Which one do you need?
There's it right here, there's a pile of e-books right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we just got.
Yeah, maybe that's reading something. There we go.
These are just those numbers up on the screen.
So the primary differences in just looking at the minimums is your numbers for the probationary firefighters are at 20%, ours are 13. And just going to the second class, it's 16 and 8. First class is 13 and 6. The driver operator is 14 and 6. The captain is 11 and 4. And the BC is 6. And our numbers show that on average the BCs are making 1% greater than on average than the minimum, and that's not included. We've taken Greeley out as an outlier, so we've just looked at the more local fire departments and fire districts. So, you know, from extrapolation standpoint, the minimums, the delta between the Pocatello average and the minimums based upon our numbers and based upon your numbers are about double what our numbers are. An example of a difference is in the probationary, Nampa increased, for whatever reason, your number is $1.13 an hour greater. Kootenai County is 56 cents greater. Your Greeley is $1.07 greater. The Twin Falls, the Lewiston, the Coeur d'Alene, and the Idaho Falls are all the same. So there's just some, from a data standpoint, and I don't think it really matters from the standpoint of being precise on what these numbers are. Both show that there is some differences between what Pocatello is being paid and what a theoretical market based upon these numbers would be. And you're being paid lower than what the theoretical market is. And I'm not sure that it makes any difference whether we're arguing over what the precise numbers are or not. It's just figuring out what the city can afford to help close that differential. So with that in mind, what we've tried to do is, and I think our numbers both show a trend that at the lower levels of employment, the difference is greater than at the higher levels of employment. At least the differential is. And so from that standpoint, we've put together a concept that basically takes, if you will, excuse me, a sum of money, and that's what we were trying to cost out. How many of these do we have?
Andrea, Ashley, and I already have them, so you just need 3, and then the rest go across.
Okay. Okay. Can you put that up on the screen? Check.
And I have the,
Can I pass this around?
yeah.
Do you guys have enough?
If you have one more, okay, good, please.
So what this shows is we've listed out the jobs on the far left column and what their corresponding pay grade is. What that really should be FY 2019, not 2016.
No, that's what's in the contract. And this is 19, and then this
Okay,
is.
okay. So it went up, so the 1%, it shows what it was last year based upon the contracts entered into in 16, and then it shows the 1% increase to each cell based upon the contract increase last year. Now, what we're proposing is not a uniform increase, but an increase that really takes into consideration that there's a larger discrepancy or delta of being paid lower in the beginning jobs of the fire department as compared to the upper level jobs of the fire department, so that we close that delta uniformly for each group, rather than all of a sudden get to zero on some groups and you still got a major delta on others. And so the larger delta, you have to close faster than the upper one, which is much lower. So what we're proposing is that for the most part would be a 1.25% increase. And again, we're talking about the net cost increase. And then for driver operators would be a 2.25%, first class would be a 2.75, second class would be a 2.75, and probationary firefighters would be a 3.5%, which really takes into consideration that their delta is greater and that it'd be easier for them to go someplace else and make more money rather than come here. As compared to leaving and doing that. Now, using our numbers, that would put the battalion chief at about 2% above the average. It would close down, where's my numbers? I have it written down. I can estimate it basically closes them down to, there it is. You'd have then the 56-hour, the captain would be about even. Then you'd have 3%, 3%, 3% on the other ones. You'd have 9% at the beginning, 5% at the second class, and then 3% between first class driver operator and the other captain or the inspector. And that's based upon our numbers, not on your numbers, but it does show a significant, almost cutting in half, in most instances, the minimum delta that we've calculated based upon Lynette's numbers. That's our offer.
Okay, so that's just based on your calculations here. I mean, is there any, or is there, you had mentioned that based on what the city can afford and stuff like that, I mean, is there a component of that calculated into this as well?
That's how that's what we were costing out to figure out what that would cost. Because the city every employer looks at employees from the cost of the employee. What's the employee cost? And if you look at firefighters, and these are just rough estimates that I was making when we were in caucus, that current salary is about 5 for the 68 firefighters is about $6.15 million. So if you've got 68 firefighters that are making or that it's costing the city $6.15 million, that's about $94,000-$95,000 on average that each firefighter costs the district or the city. Now, ambulance is a little bit higher. You've got 2.25 million, and you got 22 ambulance people, so they're closing in on about $100,000 on average of what the city has to pay on average for each one of those. So the city, when we look at the increases, those are the 1.25 would be the increase to the base cell, or the 3.5% would be an increase to the base cell. Now, I read the contract that clothing allowance goes up based upon the increase to those base, because that's really a CPI increase. So your clothing allowance is going to go up by 1.25%. Your longevity is going to go up. Your Schedule D and Schedule F is all going to go up as well. The cost of FICA is going to go up. The cost of Percy is going to go up from a cost standpoint to the city. That's why we have to look at what the total cost is to the city to figure out from a budgetary standpoint what our offers do. And this falls within what we think can be supported by the council within the budgetary, because the budget is being built on a 2.5% increase for general employees. And this gets pretty close to equating to that from a cost standpoint.
Say 2.5%, you're talking about 2.5% to their annual salary, so they
No,
would,
to the cost of the city. And we're trying to treat everybody fairly and get as close as we can, that the general employees and the firefighters get the same increases from a cost standpoint.
yeah. Can you provide the information that you, or the contracts or the base wage scale that you used to come up with that? Because we feel fairly comfortable with our numbers, and obviously your numbers and our numbers are significantly different. So is there a chance that you can
We can't,
provide?
I don't think that's a problem, but we're not taking into consideration what those deltas are. Those don't really come into play, except from a trend standpoint that both our calculations, your calculations show that the probationary second class and first class has the biggest difference between whichever average you use, and from a percentage standpoint, it's about the same. So that's the only reason we use it. Other than that, those numbers really don't have any bearing upon our offer.
Okay, well, we're gonna have to caucus and talk about
Sure.
this. So,
Yep. Anytime.
okay. So we talked about it, and we feel like as if the numbers, the percentage increases and the weight that you put in this is based a lot on some numbers that have incorrect data. Like Nampa as an example, Scott's able to pull up their base wage scale, and what you've got listed on your sheet is, all right. Well, we need to get but the numbers that are on your sheet, those are their FY18 numbers. Those are not their FY19 numbers. Nampa got a 7% raise on a one-year contract. So, also Twin Falls is another one that we feel like the numbers are incorrect. We've got the Schedule A for Twin Falls.
I'm working on it.
Yeah.
Technology is not our friend this day.
No, it is not.
It blinked at me this time.
It's a plus.
So this is what we've got from the City of Nampa Fire Department. This is their contract, as you can see. And Scott's scrolling through to the end where we can get to the Schedule A, or not Schedule A, but their base wage. So you guys, for probationary firefighter, have 1608, and it's right there in black and white, 1721, which is the number that we used.
Okay.
Okay.
I don't see how that makes any difference in our offer.
Well, you spent a lot of time trying to tie back and say that we were close to our market. And so we feel like as if unless you can show us evidence to the contrary, our offer is still legitimate because it reflects those numbers.
Well, I'm not saying your offer isn't legitimate.
Okay?
And we really weren't trying to tie back, except from the trending standpoint. And both of us agreed that the lower seniority people have a higher delta than the higher seniority people. Both analyses say that. That's the only thing that we're relying upon. What the actual numbers are really doesn't matter
Okay?
for our analysis and our offer.
All right. One other issue is we were a little disappointed in this, that you guys elected to pull Greeley out. One thing that we had done is because different departments have different structures, and Greeley has lieutenants and captains but does not have battalion chiefs. Their captain numbers correlate well with our battalion chief numbers. Their lieutenant numbers correlate well with our captain numbers. We feel like it's not appropriate to just go, we don't agree with this, so we're tossing it. Which in your spreadsheet you'd also done.
But my comment's the same.
Okay?
It really doesn't matter whether Greeley's in or out. It doesn't change the trending concept that we're relying upon.
Okay. So how did you get your percentage calculation on that, just out of curiosity? Because it appears that you've used a percentage where this is the percent we're behind, whereas on our calculations, we've used a percentage that we would need of our wage to be able to get to that number.
Was it the same?
No, it was not.
Well, our numbers aren't the same, but the concept the same, whether you call it it's behind or what you need to add to get to zero.
No,
It's the same
simply put,
concept.
if you're 80% of 100, then you're 20% behind. But if you're going off of the 80% number to get to 100, you have to multiply it by 25%.
Okay.
Correct?
But again, the issue is the only thing we're using is the trend that the lower seniority people have a higher delta than the higher seniority people. And it doesn't matter what that delta is, it's the fact that the lower people have a higher delta than the higher people. And that's the basis of our offer.
Okay. Can you provide us with a line item impact of what your offer is on the city? You know, can you let us know what the cost of your offer is to the city? But we would like.
I will have to print some.
More singular copy, but yeah.
Yeah. We'll just have to print them.
Okay. And we would also like to know, well, find it interesting too that the trend is all that matters now, whereas you shaped part of your argument previously in that our battalion chiefs would be 1% overpaid, or that it did bring us close to that market. So the problem is that it ends up being a circular argument. You bring up one thing, and then you come around and say, but that doesn't matter.
No, what I said is, and check the tape and correct me if I'm wrong, is I just went through and said that if you use our numbers and then you look at what our offer does based upon our numbers, shows that the battalion chiefs are +1. And so if you add a 1.25 to that, then they become a +2.5 or 2.25. So all I was saying is if you use our numbers and apply our offer to those numbers, this is what the new deltas become. That's all I was saying.
Yeah, which we still disagree with. But
And yeah, if you use your numbers, then instead of it being 6%, it drops down to 4.75.
on the low end.
Right, because you
everyone
guys,
else's
because you
minimum.
guys don't have a high end.
On base wage.
Right, and from a base wage standpoint, I'm assuming that the high end means that they have a matrix of some sort, which includes steps, which means that so you don't have longevity from the standpoint that
And that's
you have
incorrect. They
automatic
do have
increases.
longevity.
Right, so it's not an apples to apples because you guys don't have a top, so you only can look at the bottom.
I disagree with that. I think that we can look at the average.
Yeah. We can agree to disagree on that, but our offer is based upon what the cost is to the city, and based upon closing the deltas on the less senior people in the same ratio as trying to close the delta on the upper.
Okay.
It's that
Well-
simple.
Well, and simply put, we were, part of what we were doing here was to try to pull this up because if the and I understand what you mean with deltas, but if the information you're basing it on is incorrect, then the conclusion's incorrect.
I'm not based on any particular delta number. I'm saying the trend shows that the less senior people have a higher delta. Whether that delta is 20% or 13%, it doesn't matter to me for purposes of my argument.
Okay.
We're just trying to close that delta. That's the highest delta there is. And so our offer corresponds to giving that group of folks the highest base increase so that that delta closes. And the second highest, so then yours are basically the same. The second class is 16%, we say it's 8, okay? And 13% and 6. It's basically the same trend, or both, is that there is a delta. And there's a higher delta for the lower seniority people and a lesser delta for the higher seniority people, even under yours. And so let's close those at the same time in a way that makes them both close equally. That's what the basis of the offer is.
Okay.
It doesn't matter what the delta number is. We're talking about the trends.
Well, and we'd like a chance, like I said, to review that information as far as what the cost is to the city.
Sure,
But
we just handed it.
But you've also, all right, well, and I think we'll need a chance, we'll have to take a minute, and we'll probably have to caucus to go over that.
Sure.
But another thing that we're interested in is we would like to know what the unreserved fund balance is for the general fund. You don't,
I think Joy said it was around 1.3 million, but that can only be used for one-time purchases,
No personnel costs, not operations.
not operation. It cannot be used for personnel.
and what's your target percentage on that?
So the fund balance requirement is 25% of the next budgeted year's expenses. So like for now, it was for 2019. So for like 2018's numbers that we just finished up, we wanted 25% of the budgeted expenses for 19 as the balance. And so we have a little bit of a buffer in the general fund this year. But that's what it's 25% of expenses.
25% of expenses each year, and then, and that's the intent of the FY19 to be able to put into the balance overall.
It's council's decision if they want to be able to use the reserves or not. That's their decision, but it can only be used for one-time purchases. So mostly capital items.
So what policy is it that dictates that can only be used for one-time items?
It's in the reserve policy, and I can try to find it for you. Not sure where it's at. I can never find it when I look for it.
And what's the target for the overall balance of that account? You know, I mean, if you're putting in, you're not going to put 25% for a year in it forever.
Well, it's just 25% of your budgeted expenses for that particular, like that next year. So as your expenses go up, your fund balance needs to be higher. So we're not like putting 25% away every time. But this is the first year that we have actually met that, exceeded the 25%. We've been under in the general fund. So we haven't been able to use reserves like airport or library. They can build those into their budget to use reserves. We couldn't until now. So here's the policy. I only have the draft, but it was approved by council. Do you want?
Do you want to put it up?
If you'd like.
Or you wanted to see it?
Well, yeah.
Thank you. I haven't looked at this in a while, so I'm gonna try. Okay, so it is passed. I just don't have a copy of what resolution number it is. So it's saying that the purpose is, to maintain working capital, provide for future requirements. Let's see. Okay, so here's all tax supported funds shall accumulate reserves equal to 25% of the ensuing fiscal year's expenditures. And then any amount remaining above the required 25% reserve balance shall be available for use in the next fiscal year budget process for one-time capital needs or other improvements as approved by the mayor and city council.
It's a rolling account, which means that you have 25%, you try to have 25% of the total expenditures in there. Now, in the next year, if once everything is settled up and the auditors look and say that account is at 23% of which rolls over, and then to get to the 25%, the council adds 2% of the total operational expenses for the then current year to get it up to the 25%. Now, if there's more than 25% that rolls over into the next year, the excess is first used to make up the difference for the increased expenses for the ensuing year. And if there's anything over and above that, then under this policy, the city council can use that only for capital expenditures.
Is there a chance you could email a copy of that to Scott?
Yeah. And let me actually get with Ruth so that I can get the actual one with the resolution.
Okay.
Would that be better?
Yes.
So that you guys can, but I can email you the draft and then I can get you an actual copy.
Okay.
You good with this? Okay. I don't want that to fall. It's good for something.
Scott, I think the intent of trying to come to terms on what we agree upon for these numbers is the foundation for what we're trying to talk about, instead of hitting a swinging target based on what your offer is. We're going back and forth on what the offer is, and we have nothing foundation to base anything on. So if we don't agree on certain numbers or how we got to those numbers, a lot of it which the committee has been working on for the past year, then we have no foundation for, going back on what we're basing these offers on. So that's part of the motivation behind trying to come to terms on our numbers and agreeing on those and getting close to them.
And I understand what you're saying, and I'll say it once again. Our second offer, this offer, is not in any way, shape, or form based upon any specific number that comes out of any of the base comparisons, except for the trend that the lower seniority people have a higher delta than the higher seniority people. Now, based solely upon that, we determined that there were that everybody should get a 1.25% increase, and then 5 cells get between a 2.25 and a 3.5%, based solely upon the trend, not based. We can agree upon these numbers. That's not going to change this offer.
Agreed.
I think we're going to need a chance to go talk over some stuff, but is there a chance that we can get a general fund balance printout?
Let me see if Joyce has
I
it
think it'd
out.
be for, you don't have a
For budget? Yeah.
2019 one yet, do you? It'll
For the
just be the
budget.
2018.
Yeah, but it's for 2019 expenditures, and so I don't know if she has it out there.
I also have a question
Yeah.
too on this one.
Sorry.
You ready?
Yeah.
Actually, is there a chance that we can get a full budget printout? At least you're talking about the 19, right, for the current year?
What do you want?
Because you guys are in budget formation, right?
We're in 20.
All right. So can we get the 2019 full budget printout?
You want the full, like all general fund or?
Yes.
How big is that?
It's pretty big.
Like 300 pages?
The whole budget's 300 pages. General fund's probably 100.
So we're not gonna caucus while you review each page, right?
Maybe you could just email
I can email it.
not to print it.
How big is it?
Yeah.
300 pages
As far as,
size.
I don't think it's that big. I can put it into a PDF. Not from here though. Actually, let me see. Okay, let me see if we have. I'm gonna have to ask Joyce if she has I don't know where she has the reserve review for. But I can send you guys the budget,
Okay.
Yeah, just the general budget. You don't need the full.
just the general fund expenses.
yeah.
Okay, let me see. I'm pretty sure I have one in here.
So just so I make sure, you want the reserve policy, right?
Yeah,
which
we
looked
want
at.
reserve policy.
And then
I
you want
sent
the
that.
general fund fiscal year 19 expense?
Yeah.
And then what
Yes.
was the third item?
I think, did we already receive the
I
the
just have some
impact?
questions about this.
Okay.
Yeah. So, yeah, Scott's got a question on that.
Okay.
Okay, so I guess on this effect on the budget here, this 1.67%, is that just is that this number here? Then the overall, the bottom of this? Is this a simple average of these numbers, or is
Yes.
this weighted to employees?
It's averaged the same way your sheet was averaged, so it's a simple average.
My sheet is averaged. I don't know if I had an average like that, but.
Do you mean this one?
No, that's ours.
Okay.
The one he handed out.
Your differential average was
Yeah.
simple average.
For the proposal?
The base wages you presented on this city is this
Where
morning.
you said you had a minimum average of 13.4 and average maximum 29.2, that's a simple
Okay.
average.
Okay, so this is a simple average of just these numbers here, unweighted to employee number.
Correct.
It doesn't take into consideration the demographics of the people in each zone.
it doesn't take into consideration
So
the cost of.
then you took the total budget for wages and benefits from fire here? Is that what we have, 61?
Actually went into the salary projection file and changed it. So it wasn't just we added a 1.67. She individually went in and changed those.
I changed each pay grade to what I added the 1.25 up to the 3.5 to each separate pay grade
Okay.
separately.
Okay. And then that change then took into account that you have 15 drivers and you have, or was it?
Yeah, whatever's in salary projections, if you only have one person at a 15x, it's only gonna have one person at that 15x. If you have 20 first class firefighters, they're all gonna go up by the 2.75%. So
Okay.
it's whatever is in projections.
Okay.
Okay.
And so then this line under here, the 1.67 overall, the 6248, that reflects the numbers you put into your system.
Yes.
Not just a 1.67.
Correct.
overall.
Yep, so it reflects the changes to the pay grades, each pay grade, and then how it ripples through with the longevity and all the ad pays, the benefits, so Percy and everything else. And so that is the actual total, that would be the total cost to the city.
Okay, and so it's not taking into account like insurance or
Not-
it's not going to change?
Not medical insurance,
Okay.
no.
Just deal with salary.
Just salary and all the other benefits, so.
Is that, I assume that's like a proprietary system or is that just a spreadsheet?
It's in our system.
Okay.
So It's pretty complex.
Okay.
You can do quite a bit with it if it works.
That was our problem.
It was throwing in extra positions, so I had to take those out. But yeah, I mean, it's per person. And if there's any open positions, we put them in as usually a second or a first class, because that's what they're going to be as the year goes on.
Okay.
So we shouldn't have any probationary, like, open positions in there. So it accounts for the 68 positions in fire and the 22 in ambulance.
Okay.
So 68 and 22, that's including our staff?
You mean your management?
Or management, or management, not part,
total.
not part of our bargaining unit.
We didn't affect their wage change.
That
there
should be
was no
total
increase for
employees,
them.
yeah, but they didn't change.
So the increase is no benefit to the management team.
There's,
I think we better, unless you have some more questions, Scott, I think we probably ought to go take a break.
Nothing on this, no.
and
Okay.
I'll email Scott the budget, and I'll try to find
Yeah, we'll
the
find the
resources.
resolution, and while you're caucusing, we'll try to get that stuff together and get it emailed out. Excellent, thank you. Up and going.
Ready, Ken? Good.
Here's a resolution that we also emailed that to you, and I think it actually emailed the
Budget.
the budget information you wanted.
I got it, thank you.
We'll attach this to the minutes, the budget information we won't, because we haven't talked about it. You just asked for it while we was here, so if you bring up any of it, then we'll have to attach it to the record then. But at this point in time, we won't, if that's agreeable.
Sure.
Okay. Anytime.
Okay, so as far as comparison stuff, we still believe in our numbers. So what we've got here is we've got another proposal from our side.
Okay.
What we've done is we started with our firefighter, where we asked for 7.5%, and then based on how far behind everyone else is, we scaled it back from there. So if our firefighter was 20% behind, according to our numbers, and our captain was 16% behind or 11% behind or whatever the number may be, then it's scaled back appropriately based on the firefighter's wage. And that helps close the delta for those that are the furthest behind.
Just so I understand, you've got pay grade, and then this is the current base pay? It's not the new base pay?
That would be the new base pay
That would be the new base pay.
with the increase listed.
Okay. On your administrative folk, do you claim that they're behind as well?
What we did is that, similar to what you guys did in your proposal, we just matched them with the lowest increase on the page.
So you just matched them with the battalion chief?
Yes.
And so just so I understand, you're basically utilizing your delta numbers, and that's your justification for these increases.
What we did is our firefighters are the farthest behind. So we started with them. We kept them at the 7.5%, or we kept them at 7.5 like we previously offered. And everyone else's numbers were dropped proportionally to how far they were behind the probationary firefighter.
Okay. And I was not very artful in asking my question, Andy, and I apologize. Your initial offer, which was a 7% and 7.5% for 3, my understanding was based upon the average minimum and the average maximum. And you took the average minimum of 13.4% and say, okay, we want to make up a little more than half of that on this offer. And that was the number that you were utilizing for the 7 and 7.5, correct?
We used 7% because it was half of 14 for the base. And then based on your first offer yesterday, which gave our firefighters 0.5% more, we gave them 0.5% more in that offer.
But you were using basically the average minimum.
Yes.
Okay. Now, this one is not based upon the average minimum, but it's based upon the deltas that you've calculated for each individual position.
Yes.
Okay, that's all I was trying to find out, is what the basis of your analysis was. And do you know what the cost of this would be?
We don't have the real high-tech computer programs to figure that kind of info out.
But even
DOS-based.
yeah, but even just for the flat base increase, that's not a hard calculation for you to do.
We
Can you
can
repeat that?
throw out guesses, but we don't have the information you guys have to make those.
Well, okay,
hard
let me ask you more
number
direct.
figures.
Do you have the demographics of the number of people that are in each of the cells?
Oh, yes.
Okay, and you know how much you've increased each cell? Okay, so just merely timesing that increase by the number that's in each cell will give a cost of just the base salary increase, and you haven't done
What
that.
percentage? Yes, we do have that.
You do have that?
Yeah.
So what does that cost?
It was somewhere around 4.5%.
No, I'm not talking about percent, I'm talking about actual money.
Oh, no, I have not done that. But I mean, if you have the percentage, you can easily calculate the,
Well, it depends upon what the demographics are in each cell.
well, that
That
percentage is
determines
based
what
on
the cost
demographics.
is.
The percentage is based on demographics, so if you multiply it by wages and benefits, that'll give you the cost.
We did not do that.
I
We did not do that.
That's all I'm trying to, if you did it, I want it, if you didn't do it, it's fine.
Well, I have a
Just-
funny feeling by the time we finish talking about this, Ashley will have it. So,
Well,
That would be great.
yeah, it's because it's DOS-based, it takes a little bit longer than that. It's the checking to make sure that it hasn't brought in stuff it shouldn't that takes the longest. Anybody have any other questions on this?
I don't at this time.
I guess if you want, you could label that Union 2.
Okay. Then why don't you let us caucus for a few minutes?
Are you guys okay going a little bit longer?
How long do you want to go?
We're okay with it.
Okay. We can sit here as long as we need to. I know it's hard to get everyone's
The
schedule.
more we can get done, the better.
Agreed. Yeah.
Right, Randy.
We're missing one. One of those. Ashley. Ashley has one.
Oh, you already.
Yeah, thank you.
We're good. I, yeah. There it is. Here's drainage. Our team already has them.
This?
Yep.
Okay. So this has already been handed out to you?
No, our
Okay,
side.
Okay, our side, yes. So Ashley was able to cost out what your offer is. As you can tell, the cost of that is, I guess from our perspective, is prohibitive, both from an actual cost to the city standpoint, but also from a concept of trying to treat, in a fair standpoint, all of the employees of the city, which includes fire, police, and general employees. Providing a substantial increase, percentage increase over and above what the rest of the city employees are anticipating to get. Just, it's kind of a single vote situation, and it's difficult to provide substantial differences between various groups without a definitive justification to do so. But in an effort to try to resolve things, we've put together, our side of the tables.
Yes. Yep, our side has them.
Okay. We put together another offer, which is not a substantial change from our second offer. Basically, we've increased the four from probationary to driver operator. We've increased them each another 0.25% increase and kept everyone else the same. We've costed that out, and the cost of that is $137,515.04. So in essence, we're about $175,000 apart. If we want to talk numbers. There's not a major bridge that can bring that much closer. We're basically where we're going to be.
So you said that you can't have a definitive reason, or that you need to have a definitive reason to give us more money than other city employees, but you don't even mention the fact that during our current contract, we've taken a 0%, a 0%, and a 1%. So over the course of 3 years, we've gotten a total of 1%, whereas other city employees have continued to receive raises and step increases. I think that that's rationale enough to be able to justify giving us a larger percentage.
I would disagree with that. You guys receive a 0.5% increase because your longevity increases year after year, which is at least a 0.5%. I can run and get my Surface Pro again, but I did this analysis on where general employees fall in line with you according to the old pay scale, where you guys were still on our pay scale, so I knew where everybody was.
I thought we were just negotiating Schedule A.
Yes, but what I'm explaining is
You
you
brought
wanted
up the issue, she's
an
telling
issue.
you why there isn't a justification.
So when I looked at these different employees in the same situation where they were at the top of their scale, longevity rolled in, their raises are not what you think they are, 0.3% 1 year. So you're still receiving more at your 0.5% with your longevity than a lot of general employees who moved on to the hybrid scale.
I just had a question. So when police did their pay plan study, what was their overall increases? Can we get that? Because they did their own pay plan, not part of the city's PDPA, correct?
We did a separate pay scale for
So
them.
we'd like to see what their overall increases were at that point. Because as you know, we did not do a pay plan study with PDPA. We haven't done one for, several years. So I think part of the impetus is, I guess the reasoning is that we have not done a pay plan study, where other city employees did a pay plan study, police did a pay plan, and there were some significant increases. Not all city employees, but there were some significant increases for some city employees at the conclusion of the EDPA plan. So we do have history of some raises being given.
And all of that information is public records, and you're sure entitled to it. With respect to the police, that there was a fundamental change in the compensation schedule from the standpoint that the police gave up their longevity. And so in looking at what the compensation changes are, you have to really look at what the value of the longevity was that they gave up, the benefit that came to the city from a cost standpoint, and deduct that from the actual cost in order to get a real number for comparison purposes, because that was a major thing that was part of the negotiations that they gave up. And so they gave up longevity, and they went to a somewhat of a hybrid step compensation scheme. And so I don't remember what the exact numbers were at all, but I remember the discussion was the value that they were giving up, they thought was almost equal to whatever they were getting in return. So it wasn't in their mind, a real pay increase, but it was a way to get a more definitive yearly pay increase as the steps increased in natural course. And they felt that was more advantageous to them than the existing longevity. And the city workers also have given up their longevity in the hybrid situation as well. And you guys still have your longevity. So that's really one of the primary differences between the compensation plans between you guys and the other city employees. But Curtis, just tell us exactly what you want, and we'll figure out how to get it to them.
And on the city offer 3, I had left the calculation for overtime and firefighters at 2080. I didn't put it back to the 2912. Sorry, I was looking at overtime calc. So the hourly rate is different, but the biweekly should be fine. Sometimes I forget to switch back and forth between those two. But I can rerun that if you want that clean. It doesn't change the cost sheet itself that Ashley generated.
That was the police initial increase in 17's budget, as far as I can see, when I go back to my stuff.
So it looks like with the switch over in 17, the police giving up longevity and moving to the new pay scale was just say 80,000.
Sorry, it was an 8,000 cost, wasn't it?
Part of it is while the pay scale increased, not everyone is actually receiving that increase because they have longevity add pay that they have to eat through before they see a raise. So that's a little oddity when you look at that data.
Yeah, we basically kept them whole. So if we were to place them and they weren't whole because they were missing out on their longevity, we gave them a replacement. And so they technically will not get a raise until
We ran into it with the school resource officers. They were paid at a higher pay scale, and a lot of people held that position for a long duration of time. So when they reverted out of SRO back into the pay scale, they were still paid at the previous rate. So there's an ad pay they have to eat through. So when you look at the data, you just need to remember that little caveat.
Unless anybody has anything enlightening to add, I think that this is something that we would have to go back and talk about, and where it's already after 5. I doubt that we would have a response that would be very timely, and so probably we should just plan on meeting in the next meeting, which was scheduled on the 11th, I believe.
Thursday. Next Thursday. Or today, Wednesday.
Today's Tuesday.
Tuesday.
Yeah, we have next Thursday.
From 10 to 1.
Yeah, I think that's right. Are we still okay with that date?
I believe so.
We'll have to work out other dates.
After that, if need be.
Yep.
Okay,
Would you be able to email, you already have Scott's, or mine, could you email me the corrected sheet?
So the bi-weekly's fine, it's the hourly that's off.
Yeah, just so it was accurate.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, till 10 on the 11th.